I'm writing a book. I've been podcasting for, I think, nearly 7 years at this point, and along the way, have made a great many stupid mistakes. I've made mistakes with technology, microphones, computers. I spend so much money on things I didn't need to spend money on in the pursuit of having a great podcast. I've made terrible mistakes with guests. I've made mistakes on social media. I didn't know the first thing about what to do with my podcast clips on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and how to use all those things. But now, 6 or 7 years down the line, I finally feel like I'm getting a handle on it, and the weight of all those mistakes have actually made me relatively wise and relatively confident in the show. Here's my 5 pieces of advice that I will expound on further in the book. My first piece of advice to new podcasters is practice. Practice, 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 practice. In my experience, podcasting well is podcasting badly until you get good at it. And that is me. The book at the moment is called How I Made a Shit Podcast. And because the show for years was, it wasn't as good as I thought it was. I thought every year I look back on the previous year's work and think, man, we've come a hell of a long way. It makes me anxious. I even consider sometimes deleting old episodes because I don't want people to listen to them first and think, what is this? But actually those episodes stand as a good marker for where we've been and where we're going. Where we've going? From where we've been to where we're going, or where we are now. I'm just going to ditch that sentence altogether. My second piece of advice is technology. You don't need a full setup, in my experience. I mean, if you're financially comfortable, if you've got a big budget, or whatever that situation is, I suppose who I'm appealing to is the person sat at their house wanting to give it a go. All you need really is just a phone or something to record your voice into. You can use free apps like Spotify for podcasters, formerly Anchor, Podbean, I think is still available. There's free places where you can just record your audio and then upload to those places, and then you've got a podcast. So don't stress too much about the technology side of things. You are going to want a microphone. I mean, don't get me wrong. Later on, the listening experience is key. What people hear is vital. You want them sort of gripped. You want them enjoying the sensation. But if you can get good enough at doing it, if you can get interesting enough, if you can get experienced enough in being passionate about what you're talking about, then people will listen anyway, because it's the content, not necessarily the audio. But the audio does help. If you want to jump straight into microphones, then do some really good research. My first ever proper microphone was a lapel microphone that plugged into my fiance's iPad, and that's how we started out, way before the garage. So make sure you're careful, because I've spent a lot of money on microphones I don't need, or microphones that a couple of weeks later I realised weren't the right fit. There's all sort of different types of microphones, so do your research. That's my advice. And if you want specific advice, then it'll be in the book, or just message me in the comments and I'll let you know what microphones I used and what ones I found are great. One notable one was the Snowball microphone, the little sort of circle snowball microphone. I thought as a beginner's microphone it's just excellent. It's actually great quality, and some professionals sort of still have that around. It's very good microphone. Advice number 3 advices. My third point: when you do your first few episodes, just keep it for yourself or close family and friends. I mean, it totally depends on what you want. A lot of this advice is aimed at people who want to do podcasting professionally or see themselves having some longevity in podcasting. And if that's the case, in my experience, you have to see it as a craft, as an art, as something to improve upon, like any skill. And if that's the case, if that's where your head's at, then the best thing to do would be to record the first few episodes and then let your family and friends, if you're lucky enough to have those people around you, let your family and friends listen to it and see what they think. Ask them, be prepared for critical advice, and say, at what point did you think of switching off? What do you think I could have done better? What would have kept you more engaged? And that way you get a good head start before you publicly release the episode on, say Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, and start letting people know you're there. Advice number 4: clips matter. Social media matters. A big chunk of our listeners come from our TikTok videos or Instagram or whatever it is. So it's worth looking at either decent cameras or finding out ways that you can best utilize your phones. All we use is 2 iPhones at the moment, which you might be able to tell, but we just use 2 iPhones at the moment, and a big old ring light here. We try and utilize daylight where we can, but these are things where I'm still practicing. I've got okay with the audio side of things and presenting and putting on a good show and having a good dynamic with my co-hosts. But the technical things are still, or might eventually be to you, really important, like lighting and videography, things that can grab an audience member's attention. And you might think, well, I don't want to do all that. All I want is to do a great podcast. And I don't blame you at all. That's what I want too. But there are people out there, there are podcasts out there doing very well because they're distributing short, 30-second or a minute-long clips on TikTok and Instagram. And then people are going, oh, I'll click on that link or I'll see that podcast because I like the look of these guys. It gives me a better sense for who they are. So I'll go research a podcast. I feel like I know them a bit more, so I'm looking for the podcast on Spotify or whatever it is. So clips can be very, very important. So practice. The first load of clips we put out on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok were dreadful. And we're still not very good at it now. We're still sort of practicing it. So the important thing is to properly gauge where you are and understand that the quality is just going to get better and better and better. And it won't get better and better unless you just keep improving at it and slogging away at it and being patient. You might not be where you want to be now, but you might be there in 5 years' time. So keep putting the bricks in place, building the foundation to make sure that you have all the skills you need to be a great podcaster and stand out in whatever niche it is that you're trying to go for. Or if you've got a show that's a very general show like ours, then it's important to work on all the tiny little aspects and be a little bit of a control freak and invest time into it, because there are other shows that are just general shows, say like the Joe Rogan Experience, that are dominating that market, and you've got to see it as how do I get my way in there. And good episodes with good clips that are quick and snappy are a good way to do that. I've focused on someone like Mr. Beast on YouTube, or these great YouTubers, great YouTube videographers. There's plenty of videos out there that you can watch and study to see how best to retain retention, when to cut, because these clips are about storytelling. If we release a minute-long video, it's most of the time not a direct minute taken from the show. It's 3 or 5 minutes condensed into a minute to tell the audience a brief, interesting story in order to then get them to click on the Spotify link or to come over to the show. My final piece of advice is this. Is that 5? Just keep at it. Pod fade is a real thing. It's a phenomenon where people get tired of doing it, or they just sort of lose interest over time. If you want to be a great podcaster, you've got to put the time in. You've got to get the time. There's so many people doing it. It's such a saturated market. It's such a heaving pool. It's such a heaving pool of people that the best way to get noticed is to just do it again and again and again. It's the repetition. It's the concentrating on things like your voice, your intonation, your skills as a host. If you're doing a podcast with guests and co-hosts, then how do you best bring them in? How do you help them tell their story? Are you interrupting too much? Are you doing this too much? Those little things are annoying. So listen to your show back and make notes of what you've done differently, and be grateful for those lessons every time. Don't go, I was very guilty in the first year of going, God, I'm shit. God, I'm not very good at this. And why did I do that? And why did I say this? But the trick is to go, oh, well, I'm grateful I did those things now, because then I can iron out these qualities, or I can iron out these things I don't like, and then improve over time. So you should see podcasting as an art, as a craft, and keep going at it. Patience is the key, because sooner or later, when you get good enough, people can't ignore you anymore. When your videos, when your clips on Instagram and TikTok are good enough, people won't be able to ignore you anymore. They'll go, actually, that's a very interesting subject. I'll click on that. That's something I'm really interested in. I'll click on that. That looks funny and interesting and charismatic. I'll click on that. But you will get there, and I will get there. We're off the finish line, and we're well into the journey, but we have miles to go before we're anywhere near where we want to be. And so these principles I'm telling you here, the more specific principles that you'll find in my book coming out soon, August 1st, maybe, if I get it finished in time, is these principles matter because we have to get good at the craft. I know I've said it a few times, but get good at the craft. Focus on podcasting, be patient, and understand it might take years for you to get to where you want to be, depending on how hard you work and how hard you push yourself. Now, I hope that was interesting to somebody. I hope that was interesting to somebody out there. We, as a show, the Steve Kayla Show, is slowly getting to where we want to be. We make money from the show now. We're sponsored. We've got regular listeners. We've had some great episodes, some great successes, some ones that aren't so good, and every now and then they're very useful to have because it allows us to reflect and study them. 3 episodes in the last 6 weeks never saw the light of day because the quality was poor, because me and my co-hosts, either had an argument or something devolved into, or because it just wasn't good. There was a technical error or something like that. So I'm my harshest critic because I know that someone might be tuning into the podcast for the first time that episode and think, what the hell is this? And never listen again. So those things really matter. I hope that was interesting to somebody. I'm Steve Kalis. If you want to support me, then go to Spotify, click follow, and listen to the show on there. It's good. I promise you'll really like it. Oh, and as usual, just want to say, get yourself to Graham's Windows and Doors. That's grahamswindowsanddoors.co.uk. They are Yeovil and the Southwest's finest purveyor of windows, doors, and conservatories. They're a wonderful family-run company. They've been great partners to us. We really, really appreciate it. So get to grahamswindowsanddoors.co.uk. I'll buy the book when it comes out, but I'll give you more information on that. I'll make a video when it comes out. So thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments. I'll let you know from my experience what best to do, or what I did, or how I messed that thing up. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon. Bye 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 bye.